A lot of people want the discipline it takes to complete a massive project. They want to be a self-starter, they want to get their big idea from point A to point B, and they want to embark on a journey that they've never been on before. But a lot of us go through the cycle of trying and never feeling like we can really get it completely off the ground. I was one of those people as well. I had always highly admired people that were able to just decide that they wanted to do something big and go off and do it. All through high school, I dreamed of making my own documentaries, self-starting things, making Kickstarters, and all these different things. I had so many ideas of projects that I wanted to get off the ground or big goals that I wanted to reach, and I just never found myself able to complete them. Later on, I got diagnosed with my ADHD, and I thought, maybe it's my ADHD that makes it so that I can't do that. Maybe that's something that's not really possible for me. But a big goal came along and it really shifted my entire world because I felt so passionate about it and I felt so deeply that it needed to be done. And I did it. So today I wanted to take some time to share some tips on how I got myself from point A to point B. As someone with ADHD, as someone who didn't see myself as capable of doing a big project like that. When I was in college, I developed PTSD and I went through a period of dissociative amnesia. It was a very difficult time for me. It was a massive challenge that really hampered my life in college. Dissociative amnesia carries a lot of stigma. Recovered memories carry a lot of stigma, which is something that I learned as I got through my final years of college. I was in a massive university trial against the person who had inflicted this trauma. And I found that there just wasn't enough information for people to really be educated on how to navigate my traumatic experience. And I felt very frustrated because it really hampered my ability to advocate for myself and to get the kind of justice that I deserved. And at that time, I was also writing an undergraduate thesis on dissociative disorders and possession trance rituals. Now, was I a psychologist? Was I a neuroscientist at that time? No. I was actually a comparative literature and society student. So I had spent the last 4 years talking in my classes about race, Latin American history, gender, all these different things, very, very humanities sort of classes I had taken my entire college life. And so this thesis that I was writing was not a science-related paper at all. It was vaguely even psychology related. It was more about the sort of politics of psychology and also the cultural elements of dissociation. It was talking about possession trance rituals, and I was comparing them to a certain disorder called possession trance disorder. I was fascinated. I loved it, right? Because it was so related to my experience that I found myself really, really passionate about it. And I was also very interested in the more humanities-based elements. So I was highly passionate about this paper. What I started to learn was that actually dissociation was incredibly controversial. Dissociative identity disorder, dissociative amnesia, there was not enough information on how they worked, and that had led to a lot of different sort of social consequences when it came to how people navigated survivors of trauma, how people actually treated these disorders within psychology. And I was personally very attached to the subject, and I was also just highly interested and just fascinated in the whole thing. And unfortunately, I was actually not able to finish my paper. And this is the thing, is that I actually went in, undergraduate theses were actually optional. And I had a talk with myself at the start. I was like, you have ADHD. You've never finished something so big in your entire life. Do you think that you can finish this? And at the time, I thought, I'll have to finish it because it's a school project. And also, I think it'll bring something out of me. I felt really deeply that it was going to change my life if I decided to commit to this. So I committed, and I had a lot going on that year. I had a massive trial that was right in my first semester. It was really crushing at the end. I was navigating a lot of grief my second semester, and I was also taking some classes that were really challenging. So as much as I was so incredibly passionate about my paper, I would go to the library 7 a.m. every day working on it. I was also struggling because I was dealing with mental health symptoms from the exact thing that I was writing about. So it was very ironic. And because of that, I got to the end and I was very close to finishing, but I had classes that I was failing at and I was struggling with depression, all these things. I basically had to turn it in unfinished. And I made a fine grade and I graduated, but that moment really shook my life and changed my life because I was so sad and so frustrated. I was like, this was everything to me. I was like, if I had just gotten time to do this all day, I would do it all day. Like, I was so in love. And it was really heartbreaking for me to feel like I had failed at something that was important to me. And I also was really tired of seeing myself as someone who could not finish things. I think that really broke my heart at that point, that I was like, I just want to be somebody who finishes things. I want to feel like somebody who can accomplish a goal. And I didn't like feeling like I was going to go through life as someone who was seeing myself as someone who couldn't finish big things. I wanted to be someone who finished big things. So at that point, I actually graduated. I moved to another country. I moved to London. And the feeling that I wanted to understand the root cause of dissociative amnesia never left me. I just wanted to know so bad. It was really impacting my life that I didn't have a way of navigating my symptoms and understanding myself. So I basically embarked on this journey. I thought, I'm going to do it. Now, did I start right away? No. I thought, there's no way you're going to do something like that. That's insane. I had learned to see myself as someone who could generate all sorts of big ideas and crazy ideas of like, yes, I'm going to do this, and yes, I'm going to do that I think a lot of ADHD people would relate to. And just seeing them kind of fall off, seeing myself forget about them, and just really feeling that impact on my self-esteem, that I was not somebody who could think of a big idea and carry it out. And that frustration just lingered. And I just thought, I need to figure out a way to not be this person my whole life, because I just can't do it. But again, the feeling never left me. And I think that it helped me that it was something so personal, something I could not run away from, was this desire to understand myself. And what happened, in 2 years, I went from comparative literature and society student who had never read a neuroscience anything in my life, didn't know anything about neuroscience, seeing myself as someone incapable of finishing, incapable of getting my stuff done, to somebody who has now read over 100 texts in an entirely new field, who has run a very simple computational model. I had my project approved to be completed at a university with a very well-esteemed neuroscience program, and I have been able to accurately discuss something incredibly niche with an expert. So, how did I do it? I did not jump straight into that project. It was a process of about 2 years of shifting my entire mentality, shifting my perception of myself, changing the way that I navigated my own productivity, navigated my goals, and learning to become a finisher. That was a massive theme for me, was how do I become a finisher as somebody with ADHD, as somebody young who has big ideas already that I want to carry out. And one of the big things that came down to was prepping. So today I'm going to talk about all the ways that I'm mentally prepared to become a finisher and to finish a massive goal in my life that I never thought that I would be able to get done, not in a million years. The very first thing that you need to know, if you're going to get yourself from point A to point B on a big crazy goal, is that you're going to have to start on the inside. This is the harsh truth about completing a big goal, is that if you think that you can't do something, you probably won't. That's just the reality. If you go in thinking that you're not going to be able to do it and that it's something impossible for you, unfortunately for you, it's not going to get done. It's not going to happen. A lot of times we go in thinking, just because we're excited about it, that we think that we're capable. What'll happen often is that you think like, no, but this time I can do it. You're going to jump in, and all of a sudden, once it starts to get into the nitty gritty, you will see that all of those beliefs that you didn't deal with before you jumped in are going to come to the surface. Now, if you're ready for them, that's okay. That's going to be part of the process. But if you weren't ready for them, if you hadn't planned for the fact that they will be there, that's going to be the point where you stop. So where I started with all of this, way before I even jumped into this project, is that I spent an extensive amount of time navigating my own belief system about myself. And not being able to finish that project was really like a turning point for that, because I thought back to the time that I had jumped in and already felt worried that I wasn't going to be able to get it done, right? And I saw how my belief was mirrored back to me, right? I didn't do it. Now, I thought, I could take that as a marker of my identity, or I can start to sit with the fact that I've thought of this about myself my entire life. That's always been my belief about myself, right? So I took a lot of time at the beginning to rewrite not only that belief, but a lot of other ones. And it didn't happen quick, okay? It was a long process of first of all, becoming consciously aware of how do I actually see myself? A lot of times, how you subconsciously see yourself is different from how you consciously see yourself. So a lot of times you think things about yourself that you don't realize. You're not really that smart. You are just by nature a disorganized person. You are someone who people don't really like, or you just don't have a certain skill that you need, right? And we think a lot of things about ourselves that are not in essence true, but we make them true by seeing them as truth, right? So what I did is I had a notebook, like a digital notebook, in my iPad. And what I started to do each and every time I ran into a big bump, and at that point in time, I was having a lot of bumps in the road because I had just moved to a new country. I had to figure myself out entirely from scratch there. And I ran into pretty much every negative belief that I could about myself. You're not going to make it. You are a mess. You are disorganized. You're not adult enough. You jump too fast. You're incapable. Probably every negative emotion that I could have run into about myself came up when I moved. So what I did is every time I started to get into one of those bumps where I thought, there's just no way that I'm going to get over this one. There's no way I can get through this. I would sit with my notebook and my iPad and I would write down I would do a massive brain dump of every negative thing that I thought about myself in that moment, subconsciously, right? And as I went through that process, I started to see that actually when I brought conscious awareness to the things that I thought about myself, and I allowed myself to actually rewire and to tell myself, hey, that's not necessarily true. Like, that's a really negative thing to think about yourself, and etc. and etc. Actually, I saw that a lot of the times, the things that I was scared of didn't usually happen the way that I thought, right? And what happens is a lot of the times when we aren't aware of the fact that we think that bad thing is going to happen, we think that negative thing is going to happen, we will create that reality ourselves, right? So I thought, there's no way, like, I'm just not capable of doing this, right? And if I wasn't aware of the fact that maybe that belief is something that I'm going to force to happen versus something that I think could happen, I could have very easily, called my parents, been like, I can't do this, I'm coming home, there's just no way, right? And then I would always think that about myself. But because I was able to sit down and actually write down, like, hey, I do think that this is going to happen, that's kind of my automatic prediction. I was like, okay, let's stop, let's sit, let's think about it. Why do you think that you're going to do this? And is there a way that maybe you could just do a little bit more creative problem solving, be a little bit more patient? Maybe you're just getting anxious. And I went through that process a lot in ways that had nothing to do with this project at first. And that was really useful for me because I saw how a lot of the times things didn't necessarily need to go the way that my anxieties told me they would if I took some extra time to actually sit and reflect. Now, here's the thing about jumping into a project, something that you previously thought you would not be capable of, is just because you're aware of the fact that you have that anxiety and that you tell yourself something different doesn't mean the anxiety is not going to come up again all the way through the project, okay? A lot of times it's going to come back up for you again. The point of actually going in with the awareness of the beliefs that you have about yourself is that when those beliefs naturally come up again, you're going to be ready. You're going to know that you have that belief about yourself, and you're going to know that it's something that you already assumed, right? I can't finish this. I'm not good enough. I'm not smart enough. This isn't for me, right? And this time around, rather than letting that be the stopping point for you and creating that reality for yourself, what you're going to do is you're going to bring awareness to the fact that this is you thought this. You believed this about yourself, and you believed that this was going to happen. And you're going to take a moment to consciously sit with that anxiety and to think, what do we do with this fear, right? Are we going to let that be the thing that stops us? Is there an action plan that we can make that'll show us something different? What if I just keep going? Will I see myself differently, right? And you start to develop a really flexible sense of self that can change with the thing that you want to do, right? Because a lot of the times that big project, that big thing that we want to do is going to bring out a lot of new elements to ourselves that we didn't think that we could have, right? All of a sudden, you're going to start seeing yourself as somebody confident, public speaker, somebody who goes out there, somebody who has intense discipline, right? And any journey that you embark on is going to bring out new parts of yourself. But if you have a very inflexible sense of your own self and you're not willing to rewrite and you're not willing to change that perception, you're not going to get as far as you can go. So that's the very first thing. Here's one example on my end is that I always felt incredibly insecure about myself academically, that I wasn't really worth going to office hours over. I didn't want to go and sort of bother people. My ideas are really that worth sort of wasting people's time with. I actually have a video from really early on in my YouTube where I started to talk about all this before I went into my project. So you can see the kind of thinking that I was doing before I jumped in at all. You know, I knew I had that anxiety, that I just wasn't really intelligent enough, or I wasn't really sort of useful to people enough to sort of bother professors with, bother people that could actually give me opportunities with, right? That was one of my biggest things. And I had that anxiety popping up to the end. To this day, I still feel, oh my God, do I reach out to that person? Do I ask for their advice? Do I set a meeting with my supervisor? You know, all these different things. I still get the anxiety, but this time around, I know that that's just something that I believe about myself, right? And I can give myself the push to actually go through and actually reach out to people. And what came from that is I had, first of all, a meeting with somebody in my life who was a neuroscientist before I started this project, and I talked about my idea and what I wanted to study, and she was very encouraging, and she gave me sort of even offered to reach out to somebody, and that didn't go all the way through, but that was very motivating for me to think that somebody would see my idea as something worth following through with, right? Later on, I met with her again when I was really far into the project, and I that was very nervous. I didn't want to reach out to her because I thought I don't want to waste her time with my little personal project, right? But I was like, I need to communicate to people, with people about this project. Like, I can't just sit on it. So, you know, because I was like, I don't fully, nobody can do anything in isolation. And I'm also kind of a novice. So I was like, I need to get voices of people that actually know what they're talking about. I didn't really know what was going to come from that at all, but I was like, I just have to interact with somebody and just get the ball rolling. So I had a meeting with her, and it's not her specialty, but she was able to give me some really good advice. And what she did advise me to do next was to make everything into a proposal, explaining everything that I'd done, my thought process behind everything, right? And what that turned into is that around that time, I realized that I had the potential to do my own research project through my psychology degree. And I was very nervous about turning this into a proposal because it was a little bit more neuroscience heavy. I didn't have a degree in it, and I didn't know if it was going to be okay to do it. I didn't want to waste my time, but I thought, let me just go for it because she told me I should do it anyways, right? So I wrote everything into a proposal. And this is the gutsy moment, is that I had to I sent that proposal to my professors. I sent it out to multiple different professors at my school as well because I needed to have a supervisor. And I sent it forward to a professor that I actually really respect a lot. And I was really nervous because there's somebody who, again, like, they're really in their field, right? And I was like, you know, I hope I don't seem crazy or weird or whatever. And as I did that, it bounced down the line to the point that I did get 2 supervisors actually who are really experienced in this, right? And I really worried about it at first because I thought, like, you know, if this just sucks and if this is just one of those kind of stupid little, like, you know, this was like a whim, I'm going to be really embarrassed, right? It's going to be like a waste of my time. And also I could seem really dumb in front of people that I respect. But that didn't happen, right? People approved my project and it ended up getting approved, and I have to, you know what I mean? Like, it was not the bad thing that I was. And then I even ended up getting really good feedback from one of my current supervisors. So if I hadn't been aware of the fact that I had that belief system, I wouldn't push myself to the point that I would rewrite it. And that's why it was very important for me to know what I thought about myself, not because it was going to go away instantly, but because I needed to know that I was going to have that anxiety pop up, and naturally that was going to happen, but that was simply a belief that I held about myself, and it didn't mean that was the truth about how my reality was going to pop up for me. So now that you're armed and ready with all of those belief systems and all those things that you know about yourself now, what you're going to do is you're going to start small. Here's the other big mistake that I think people make, is that they go straight from I've never done this before to I'm going to do the biggest possible version of it, right? Like, they've never owned a business before. They're just, you know, normal person, whatever. And they think, I'm going to now run an empire. Okay. And I'm going to start it. I'm going to jump all in, right? And then the thing is that you haven't set yourself up for success by experimenting first and by really testing what you're capable of in a smaller format. So after I wrote those beliefs about myself, obviously I still knew that that was a desire of mine, that I really wanted to do that, right? But I actually did not jump straight into, okay, so today I'm going to start the project now. No, it still took another year. It took another year of experimenting and rewriting those belief systems in smaller ways. So the first thing that I actually did, so when I first moved to London, I had a friend who wanted to do 75 hard with me. And I thought, why not? I had never, actually my best friend had asked me multiple times to do 75 hard with me, and I never started it with her because I wasn't like a super fan of 75 hard, which I'll explain in a second. And I just thought was very unsustainable. So I just never really jumped into it because I was like, I think I didn't want to jump in and be like, this is another thing that's going to make me feel like I can't finish things, right? Because I already kind of saw like, no. But she asked me, I was like, why not? We have nothing else to do. We were both working. I was volunteering at a hostel at that point. I was like, doesn't hurt. Let me just see what that comes with, right? And we started. She dropped off, and then I went maybe a few more days after, and then I thought, I was actually really enjoying it. This is the thing, is that I dropped off and I didn't continue because it was kind of something that we were going to do together, and then it was a lot. I was getting overwhelmed, so I stopped. But in the times that we were doing it, I was like, oh, this actually is nice. What I really enjoyed was reading 10 pages a day every day. I actually finished like multiple books doing that, and I had really wanted to get back into reading, so I came out of it with a more positive sense of 75 hard, but I didn't finish it, right? So I moved into my own apartment later, and this is what I actually did, was I took all of that information that I had gotten about myself, all of those sort of belief systems, all the understanding. I thought, how am I going to start tackling this? I thought, I need to finish something. I need to choose something, and I need to not stop until I finish it. And no matter what I do, like, I'm going to finish it, okay? Like, it's going to be done every single day, because I thought if I do it one time, I've broken the belief system, and I've started fresh as somebody who at least has finished one difficult thing. Now, did I do 75 hard exactly as it was? No. And I'm going to tell you why. 75 hard is great. If you haven't seen 75 hard, I'm going to put it up again. It's just an internet challenge where you basically have to do a big list of things for 75 days. And it's supposed to be really challenging, but you come out of it feeling very disciplined, very motivated. And this is the problem, is that some of the things on the list didn't really resonate with me. I didn't feel the need to read 10 pages of a self-help book every day. This is my personal take on self-help content, is that I don't like to overconsume self-help content. I think it's better to get in touch with you and what do you need, and to make it a personal reflection thing. And I also don't like feeling constantly bombarded with different belief systems and ideas and stuff. Like, I keep it very minimal with my self-help stuff. Like, I don't like to overconsume, right? And I think that a lot of people think that just because they're reading more self-help books means that it's gonna, they're gonna change their life, but they don't actually implement, and that's the issue. So I didn't really I just didn't feel the need to read 10 pages of a self-help book every day. Didn't feel that aligned with me. It doesn't mean it's not a great thing to do, but it just wasn't for me. Also, I found it pretty unsustainable for my life. So, for example, one thing is that you have to do 45 minutes of exercise outside and 45 minutes inside every day. So that's an hour and a half of exercise every day. And that's a lot for me. It's exhausting. I had also my nervous system sometimes, particularly back then, I had a lot of chronic stress. So it was just a big struggle for me. And I don't think that you need that much exercise every single day. Is quite a lot. Doesn't mean that it can't be good for you, but for me, I just didn't feel like it was that sustainable. And I found myself really struggling when I did it with my friend to get that 90 minutes, and it was like a lot. These were the things that made me feel out of whack, not very in alignment with 75 hard, but I liked the idea and I liked the format. So what I actually did is that I actually, at that point, this was really important for me, I did some reflecting on my own relationship to my discipline journey. I actually made a video that I'll put up here. This was after I had finished that 75 hard challenge that I made for myself. But I started thinking about how sometimes we feel like we need to fit the mold of somebody else's discipline. And it doesn't work for us, but that doesn't mean that we're not disciplined. And I started realizing that a lot of things that I actually cared about, that I would be willing to do every day and that were still disciplined, I didn't see as worthy enough because they weren't the most crazy challenge in the world. For example, drinking herbal tea. I loved herbal tea. And it's good for you, right? Or for example, cleaning my house every day, right? These are things that I felt were still a challenge to make sure that I am consistent enough to do it for 75 days, but that were still within the scope of what made sense for me, and etc. So I had a good think about my own discipline path, my own discipline journey, and I made my own 75 hard. So I'm going to put it up here for you. This is what I did every day for 75 days, and I had some weekly sort of things. So I changed it up for me, but still with the format. I kept as much of the format as I could, and I still did it for 75 days, okay? Here's the other thing that I don't like about 75 hard, and this was the one that really was important. The point of 75 hard is that if you fail with one thing, you're supposed to start over. Now, that's the kind of discipline mentality that I don't like. And I think that this is why a lot of people think they're undisciplined, is that they think you have to do it perfectly or you failed. But what I thought was, it's more important for me to feel like I continued and I persisted for 75 days and I finished something for 75 days, right? And to get to the end and feel that accomplishment than to think, oh, today I didn't read 10 pages, so I'm done and I'm starting over. That's how you generate a negative relationship to discipline. So I also made the rule that even though I did do as much as I could for 75 days, I also, if something didn't get done, I would either do it the next day or I would just keep going, right? Because the point was to get to 75 days. And because of that, I very, very rarely fell off. Like, I pretty much did every single thing every day. Only here and there, once in a while, did I kind of, like once in a blue moon, I missed something. I just thought, I'll just do it tomorrow. I'll keep going. And I finished. And that was the first time I did something every day for 75 days, the amount of like the magnitude. And it was a challenge, even though it wasn't like, 90 minutes of exercise and all these different things that were a bit too much for me. I still found myself challenged, right? And I think it's the difference between lifting like a super mega weight. I think it's like going into the gym and feeling like you're going to lift 100 pounds day one. And you're like, oh, I can't lift it, so I'm just not going to ever be good at weightlifting. But any weightlifter will tell you that you grow over time. You push to the point that it's still difficult for you, but not over the top. And then you get stronger, right? So that's what I did for that 75 hard challenge. And that was the most accomplished I'd ever felt in my life when I got to the end. I was like, wow, I did this for 75 days. I listened to a podcast every day. I felt financially educated. All these different things that were really important to me at that point. And I felt better than I was like, wow, I finished. I actually finished something big, and that really changed my life. So then I went off to my next challenge. I thought, okay, now we see ourselves as a finisher. Now you see that you can push yourself and you can do it. What do we go for next? My senior thesis that I'd never finished. And I had it in the back of my mind. This was my number one thing before I started this other project. I was like, I'm going to finish that thesis by myself. Even if no one's going to read it, I'm going to finish it because I can't have that hanging as like a scar on my discipline, right? So I went back to my senior thesis, and this is where I really started to rewrite, because I never thought that I'd be able to finish something that there was no deadline for, no teacher, no nothing, right? It was just for me. I thought if I can really develop that attitude, I can do anything. If you can develop that internal validation, you can really do anything at all. So that was really important to me. So I went back to that unfinished project. If you have an unfinished project of your own, I highly recommend using that as a motivation, right? If you have, I don't know, you were embroidering something, you never finished it, or you started a painting, you never finished it, etc. That's great motivation and a great starting point. I went back to that senior thesis and I finished it. I did everything I needed to do. For days, nobody told me to. I would go to a coffee shop. I would read academic texts all on my own. I read some of the most important texts that changed the trajectory of my career in those days. Oh, the other thing is that during 75 Harder, I actually finished my first neuroscience book as well. I read Rethinking Consciousness by Michael Graziano. So that also was really exciting for me. I forgot to mention that I actually even finished my first neuroscience book back then. And then in finishing my senior thesis, I read some texts that were highly important to my career, to my life. I read about structural dissociation. I read about a lot of different things, dissociative absorption, and I learned so much about dissociation that I had never learned before. And that was really special for me. And when it was done, I felt more accomplished than I ever felt. I was like, that is like a massive hole in my life that's just filled. And I liked it. I was like, I love writing. I love to write on my own. I love to do this. I love research. I was really happy doing it and I really enjoyed it. And I was like, you know what? now we can actually figure out how to start this project. Also, this is the other thing, is that actually after that, I decided to apply for a PhD program. Didn't think I was going to get in, didn't get in, but it forced me to start to sit with some of the things that I had sat with. I thought about cortical attention, that I had read that, and I had all sorts of thoughts about it and was thinking about it in dissociation context, and all these things I read about dissociation, and I started to generate ideas, and I decided to apply for a PhD program just to see, right? Just to see. Because of that, I had to actually start to put my theories into a format that was going to be in an academic context. And I learned about how to write like a research proposal. I learned a lot from that experience. And I felt very insecure about doing it because I didn't think at all that I would get in, and I didn't, right? And I felt very insecure about the whole thing, but I knew that I had to do it because I was like, I need to put myself in an uncomfortable position and I need to learn, right? So that's what I got from that. And also it helped me rewrite other ideas again about wasting people's time. I reached out to people, all these different things. Did I make it? No. But by then I had theories because I had forced myself to sit with the ideas that I had generated. I thought about cortical attention. I started learning about different things. I started learning about gamma synchrony and theta waves and all these different things. And I started learning about sharp wave ripples, okay? I read a paper about sharp wave ripples, and sharp wave ripples came to be the core of my research and the core of everything that I'm doing now. And for the first time, I actually had a theory on how dissociative amnesia worked. So that was the turning point, was me putting myself in that uncomfortable spot. And I read and I was like, oh, I think this is it. And I felt really good about it. I was like, this is it. This is what I was looking for. So I jumped into my project. And like I said, I went and I spoke to somebody about my idea and everything. I was applying to different programs, and I thought, like, I feel really passionate about this. I feel like really this is it. And then I read about computational neuroscience because I was very lost in, like, how do I get this done? Because the challenge for me is that I was a comparative literature and society student. So I wasn't able to get into like neuroscience programs. I tried, I didn't get in. I was like, how do I make that jump? Because I was like, how can I run an experiment if I don't have an MRI machine or, things like that. I was like, how do I do it? Now, previously I had spoken to somebody about the fact that I had read Rethinking Consciousness by Michael Graciano, and I had read these neuroscience books, and somebody gave me a book on computational neuroscience, but that wasn't the reason they gave it to me. They were giving it to me to explain a different idea. But after I got rejected from my PhD program, I was still I was like, but I need to do this. Like, I need to figure out. I just thought, I don't know what I'm going to do, but I'm going to keep reading because I'm going to assume that something will come for me, right? And I started reading this book, Surfing Uncertainty, and I realized that you could do all of this on a computer. And I was like, I can do that. And I had no experience, but I went and I looked it up on ChatGPT. Like, how do you basically, can I do this for free? And ChatGPT said, yeah, there's actually a lot of free programs online. And I was like, oh, I got it. That's cool. I could do this. And that became an anchor for me. Now, did I jump straight into doing a computational model? I was tempted, actually, because I didn't fully understand everything. I was like, let me just see how to do it. But I realized that I need to start reading. So what I did was my next challenge, which this is actually, I've been working on this for so long that at this point, this was 7 months ago now. I needed to read 60 texts, right? I looked up how many academic papers does somebody need to read to be reputable. And they said around 60 texts, for one paper. So I thought, okay, at first I was like, that's way too many. That's so much. That's going to take me forever. But I was like, that'll build the muscle, right? And it'll build that discipline muscle. You need to read that many. So I embarked on a mission to read 60 texts. That's it. And every day I downloaded new texts. I would read and read. And I would read on the bus. I would read on the train. I would read at work. If I was a nanny back then, if the kids I was nannying were sleeping, I would read. I just read and read and read papers, thinking all you need to do is get to 60 texts. And that was kind of evoking the whole 75 hard feeling of you just need to finish. And I did it. So by that point, then I felt very comfortable. Then I thought, wow, okay, now I've read 60 texts. I have that internal motivation. I can finish something like that. At this point now, I'm thinking I'm really going to be a neuroscientist one day. I was like, I love this. It didn't feel like a chore to read difficult text. then I was really in a good place, you see. So it took a while of doing smaller things. That this is the thing, is that a lot of times the biggest thing is the most exciting. So we want to jump straight into it. But if you jump straight into like the deep end and you don't know how to swim, it's not going to go well for you. And you're going to keep internalizing that as part of your identity. So what I needed to do was set the stage for me to get to that point, right? So it took a lot of setting the stage in advance and seeing what I was capable of in smaller chunks that slowly changed my sense of self and my identity in a really big way over time. Now, how do you incorporate this in your own life? Let's say you want to be one day an event planner, okay? Really specific. If you want to be an event planner, one day you want to be like, I want to be hosting massive events for people and things like that, right? Throw a party in your house. Have you ever thrown a good party, right? Throw a good party and treat it like you're planning an event. Write down everything, think, how am I going to source all the food? How am I going to do all this, right? Throw a really good, successful party and see what you're capable of there and see, what did I learn from that? How do people respond to that? Do people like it, right? I say this especially for my fellow ADHD people because I know how we are. Like, here's another example. You want to start a restaurant, right? The idea of owning your own restaurant is the most exciting thing in the world. Now, are you going to go out and immediately figure out how to get a storefront, all these things? Your ADHD brain will tell you yes, and you will immediately start researching how to get that storefront and all these different things, right? Here's the thing. Can you run a really, really well-planned dinner party for your friends for a month? If you start that and it gets boring to you and you feel like you're not doing a good job and all these things, how can you expect to run a restaurant, right? So this is a thing about testing yourself on smaller stages over time, is that you start to see what you're made of and you start to see, how much do I care? You need to start doing experimental stages, experiment with the things that you care about and learn to get really good at them over time, and then jump into the thing that you care about. Because a lot of times you could be incredibly capable of doing that thing that you want to do. It's just that if the small version of it is boring to you, it may not be the thing for you, unfortunately. Or you might not have the skill set yet, unfortunately, and that will save you a lot of time and a lot of money, and also help your self-esteem. Because I think, again, a lot of us tend to jump into things that we, the biggest dream that we have right away, but unfortunately you just didn't develop the skill set yet. And that will become very, very apparent the minute you step into that really massive dream that you just jumped into on the fly, thinking, I'm going to figure out how to, I'll figure out my own discipline journey. I'll figure out all that. Like, it'll make it come true. Like, I'll get all those skills in that space because I'm so determined and I care about it so much. And you might care about it a lot and you might be incredibly capable of it. But a lot of times you just aren't prepared and you just aren't ready yet mentally. It doesn't mean that you can't be ready, but that's the thing, is that actually doing this prep, you see how it grew, it snowballed incredibly fast for me. Like, to even think that I'm here right now, the snowball is really, really effective, but it's just that you need to let that snowball build and it'll start to roll, and it'll roll fast and you'll be like, whoa, how did I get here so quick? It's because you took the time to really change the way that you navigated the world and you built that muscle. Lastly, you have to be ready for how incredibly life-shifting, overwhelming, and etc. it's going to be for things to start going well. Because you have to start getting ready for the fact that your beliefs about yourself will change, and that can also be incredibly confronting and vulnerable, and it can be intense. It was very, very intense for me to start getting to the point where I was actually succeeding. Very intense. Psychologically, it was like, whoa, this is insane. I didn't think that I would make it this far. And a lot of times that can be just as scary as getting to a place where you feel like you're failing. You will have to change. You will have to become a new version of yourself. And yeah, you'll have to basically see yourself transform before your very eyes. And if you're not ready for the vulnerability that takes, you should mentally prepare for that too. Because a lot of times we start to see ourselves change and we start to see our life change and we run away and we get very nervous about it. And we're like, whoa, this is incredibly vulnerable that my whole life is going to transform. And now I like myself a lot more. I feel different. My habits are changing. I feel like I'm showing up in the world as a different person. People are seeing me succeed. People are seeing new elements of me and getting a new sense of who I am and everything. And that's also a big thing to mentally prepare yourself for. That is going to happen once you start to succeed. And yes, it's going to be intense and it's going to be exciting, but make sure that you're open to that type of vulnerability, because I think a lot of people run away from things when they get good. And we see that a lot of times in relationships, you know, oh, things are starting to go good. I'm really overwhelmed by that. And I'm overwhelmed by the vulnerability that takes. So I'm going to shut it down and get out of here, right? We don't often talk about how that can happen in your goals too, right? And it's like, oh, wow, I'm starting to be successful. Let me mess this whole thing up. Let me run away from it. I wasn't actually ready to like myself, ready to have people see me, ready to have people reacting to me, all these different things. Sometimes you're just not ready. And it can be good to remind yourself that that is going to happen and mentally prepare yourself for the fact that life is going to change and become very different. And you're going to feel sometimes, like I feel sometimes very wobbly and like, whoa, I'm in this world that I never expected to be in. Never could I have imagined to be here. And it's going great for me. And it's very scary. And I don't know what's coming next. Sometimes it's like the snowball grew to the point that I imagined it would. And now I don't know. It's like the snowball's still rolling. And I'm like, whoa. I think the biggest and most vulnerable thing for me as I've gone through and become more successful is like, where is this going next? It's exciting, but it's required a lot of vulnerability on my part and willingness to be okay with the unexpected and to not get lost in my own plan. Sometimes you have to let life take you places. And once you start to succeed and you get into that place where your plans start to work out, you really can't expect where it's going next sometimes. And that can be incredibly vulnerable. So I would say that's the final thing you have to mentally prepare yourself for, is that things will go well at a certain point and you have to be ready for how much your life will change. So basically, those have been my big tips on how to mentally prepare yourself to become a finisher, to actually get your big goals out there and change your own life. Yeah, I think it just requires a lot of willingness to change yourself, transform yourself. You have to see yourself as very malleable as well on the inside. You have to be adaptive and go with the flow. And also, you have to have a little bit of grit and a little bit of obsessiveness sometimes and etc. Because it took a lot of obsessiveness and a lot of like, I need this to get myself to the place where I became a finisher. I wanted to be a finisher really bad. I was like, I have to become a finisher. Once you start to finish one thing, two things, small versions of your goals, watch how your life will change. Watch how you'll see yourself very differently, because you'll start to see like, I can really take on big things. So I think the point that I'm at now is like, wow, this is the biggest thing that I've ever done, to go from no knowledge to I'm doing this project in an academic setting. And I think I found it and I think I did it, the thing that I was really searching for. And I've just been feeling like really like, wow, there's a lot of other big projects I could take on. I've been thinking I have a software. I was like, I could do a software. I'm like, I could learn to code. I could teach myself more computational neuroscience before I even get into a program. I've been like, wow, the possibilities for me right now feel so endless, and all these different things that I could do. And it's very exciting. It's very fun. But I think you just have to know that that's going to be the path. You know, you start to finish things and you start to finish things, and you get like an internal accomplishments list of all of the different things that you finish, and you start to look back on those when you hit a bump and you're like, but I did this, but I did that, I finished this, I finished that, right? And it starts to become part of who you are. That's when you're in a sweet spot. That's like the golden spot. Anything can happen from that point. You can start to take on bigger things. Okay, I ran, you know, I did a year's worth of dinner parties for my friends, well-planned dinner parties, etc. Post them on social media, whatever. Now I'm going to start to do catering. Now I'm going to open a restaurant. Now, oh my God, my restaurant's successful. I can open 10 restaurants, right? And you just go slowly. And I think that's a better way to go about meeting your goals. Or I think a lot of people feel that pressure to jump straight in. It's like, no, test yourself and you will see yourself differently. So yeah, those have basically been my big tips on how to mentally prepare yourself to fly and to finish all the big dreams in your hearts. Thank you for listening.